horror landscape is filled to the brim with icons and mascots that were successful and failures. The big ones like Freddy, Jason, and Michael speak for themselves, hence only needing their first names mentioned here. You could even go another round with Pinhead, Leprechaun, or Leatherface for that matter. Looking down the aisle at the literal murderer's row of horror movie villains, you can't shake a stick without hitting some one-off baddies that were clearly meant for multi-movie stardom, but due to box office or critical hate, were regulated to one movie. Killers like Horace Pinker from Shocker, Dr. Decker from Nightbreed, and Cropsey from The Burning. What about those stuck in a limbo of absolute anguish? The ones that have only one or at most two good movies to their name while never getting the further respect that they deserved. Pumpkinhead is one of those movie monsters that really should have taken off, but over the course of nearly 20 years it has 4 movies, a video game, and a comic series that is full of unfulfilled potential. I think most people know the name, but does that first movie stand the test of time? The movie Pumpkinhead is actually inspired by the poem of the same name by Ed Justin. Maybe we could have saved this for an adaptation video, but Pumpkinhead is a movie that seems to have a much better reputation than the rest of its series. Kind of like that first couple of Hellraiser movies. The production company who had purchased the rights, De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, approached legendary FX master Stan Winston with the script to get his opinion of the special effects and how much he needed to pull it off. Winston liked it enough to ask if it could be his directorial debut. Winston would only direct 5 other projects and only 1 other movie. You remember a gnome named Norm, right? Everyone seemed to have a pleasant experience with genre legend Buck Flower going out of his way to say so. While Winston did some rewrites on the shooting script, the screenplay was written by Mark Patrick Carducci and Gary Girani. They were inspired by the movies of Italian legend Mario Bava and created a tale of revenge and pain. This was the first screenplay for Girani, and he would only go on to have 5 additional credits to his name. Carducci, similarly, only had 5 total credits including the screenplay for 80s drive-in classic Neon Maniacs. Carducci may have had more, but he tragically died in 1997 at the age of 42. In front of the camera gives us Lance Hendrickson as the other star of the movie. I say other star because the actual creature of Pumpkinhead, who Winston had to clarify would not actually have a pumpkin for a head, is the true star who would have the biggest legacy as a character. You have genre stalwarts like Buck Flower and even the legendary Dick Warlock, but many of the rest of the cast, or fodder here, never went on to huge acclaim. Hell, some of them had their IMDb picture as their character from this movie. Jeff East was young Clark Kent and Superman and showed up in things like Deadly Blessing and Wes Craven's TV movie Summer of Fear. Kelly Ramsden stopped acting in 1995 but also has Ghoulies 2 and After Midnight under her belt. Joel Hoffman has only been in 10 things, but had a 2-year span that included Killer Workout, Slumber Party Massacre 2, Slaughterhouse, and Pumpkinhead. A fun cast that leans heavily on its bigger genre star power, but that gels together well. The movie is a fairly simple one, with a legend of something called Pumpkinhead, which is kind of a grief and revenge demon. Young Ed Harley, played by Hendrickson, sees this firsthand as a kid and later as a widowed older man, who loses his son to some absolute douche weasel teens. Seriously, nearly none of them are likable. Instead of going to the authorities or burying his son, he follows the breadcrumb trail to the old woman of the woods. He wants revenge like he saw when he was a kid, and boy does he get it. He digs up a corpse from a specific graveyard, and the witch uses blood from the father and the son to create what the locals call Pumpkinhead. Joel, the leader of the gang, makes sure that no one calls the police or goes for help. Something that will not heap mercy on him from the audience or the revenge-seeking gourd monster. While Joel eventually decides he wants to turn himself in, Pumpkinhead is already there and unstoppable. He starts killing the kids one by one, and poor old Ed feels every kill and every act of violence in his very soul. Ed tries to have the witch stop it, but she says nothing can be done and he'll die if he tries. Pumpkinhead seems to be turning more human while Ed is becoming more monstrous, and Ed accidentally hurts himself, which he notices also hurts the creature. He's figured out a way to get rid of the creature, but it's gonna cost him his own life. He shoots himself, and one of the final teens finishes him off. Both Ed and Pumpkinhead die, and Ed is buried in the same graveyard that he got the first body from. When someone needs revenge, it will be Ed as the new Pumpkinhead. The first one that stands out, probably because it's Stan Winston and all, is the practical effects. What's wonderful about them is they're timeless. The good ones could have been made in any decade and will always, I repeat, always stand the test of time. The movie makes good use of the creature and the admittedly less gory deaths to give us viewers something that can be watched by people 35 years later and still enjoy the look and feel. In 1988, we were on the cusp of CGI being implemented both good, like Jurassic Park, and bad, like the end of Night of the Demons 2. CGI in general tends to ebb and flow with its quality, but good practical, it never lets you down. The movie also lives on the cusp era, and by that, I mean it rides fashion, feeling, and dialogue that skate the realm between the 80s and the 90s. It really looks like it could have been released in the late 80s or early 90s, an identity crisis that any cusp movie feels. The other signs of the time involve tropes of that era. While it isn't a slasher movie by most definitions, the group of teens that we watch die follow a lot of the profiles we're used to seeing. While this continued into the 90s and 2000s, the 80s had a special brand, a flavor, if you will. Finally, the movie sets out to create a convincing and reusable villain. They did succeed as the property had 4 movies, a video game, comics, toys, and the other things we will get with our favorite horror properties. The part that wasn't so successful was that none of the movies are really connected other than the fact that they all have Pumpkinhead and Lance even comes back for 2 of them.
There's a price to be paid for doing wrong, and there ain't no running from it.
While the character's cool, you should probably stop after 2, which is dumb but fun. The world building in this movie is great. Not only the legend, but the entire community understands that there is an evil power and the cost to wield such power. The townspeople themselves, from the kids to the older folks like Buck Flower and even Ed Harley, everyone feels like they are from a different time and place altogether. Perhaps cursed by the revenge demon they use to live in squalor. The other part tied to the world building is the resurrection scene. The Witch of the Woods has no qualm bringing the monster back and has clearly done this multiple times. On top of that, while we see her as the one doing it, it's more than probable that she isn't the first of her family or the community to do this trick. That opening introduction scene does a great job of building not only dread but expectation on what we're dealing with. While you don't see Pumpkinhead very clearly, you know what the kids that kill Ed Harley's kid will be up against. Well, there are far fewer things that don't hold up here. I hate to be that guy that picks on kid actors, but our little guy is a little more than emotional fodder for Henriksen and the story to get going. The music here also goes a little too heavy on the podunk aesthetic at times, and other times it's too soft. I actually had quite a few more for this section, but I watched the movie twice in the span of 3 days, and a few of the perceived negatives actually kind of grew on me. One thing that is kind of a bummer, and certainly does not hold up, is the gore, or lack thereof. This is a horror movie with a horrible creature, and the only actual gory death is that of our main mega Chad Joel. While part 2 would rectify this, more gore would actually round out this entry just a little bit more. Pumpkinhead is a good time. Is it the legendary property that its reputation makes it out to be? No, not really. Does it do enough to be thoroughly enjoyable and rank as a late 80s classic that should be watched by any horror fan? Yes, absolutely. It does more than enough to earn its spot as a holiday movie. While Winston went out of his way to make sure that the creature didn't look anything like an actual pumpkin, the content in the title alone give it enough points to be a Halloween rotation movie. Pumpkinhead may not rank up with the other horror villains created in the 70s and 80s, but it more than stands the test of time.